centre stage. It can be a scary and sometimes even lonely place. But not for our guest today, who's a talented performer and comedian. Jo Randerson has been described as one of the most gifted writers in contemporary New Zealand theatre. She's an award-winning author, a poet, and has been the Burns Fellow at Otago University. In an era when, for many young people, Christianity is unthinkable, Jo Randerson is not only pleased to be a Christian, she's the proud daughter of an Anglican bishop.
What are they, Jo? Are they panels?
Well, one of them is a panel about...
My parents have been, not only very loving and generous and quite unique individuals, but they've never pushed the faith on us. We grew up in St Peter's Church in Wellington, and we were 200 metres from the church where we lived. And we had a great, diverse congregation, very eccentric. Definitely there were times when I found it difficult that, that whole thing, the door constantly being open and people coming in and out, the phone constantly ringing. If you were sick, then it was like you'd receive 26 phone calls from distraught parishioners during the day. And, often you'd find yourself at age 10 attempting to counsel a, distraught divorcee or something. And also, Easter, Christmas, family occasions are always filled with all these other people who had nowhere else to go. And we, very ungraciously as children were quite angry at that. And as I grew up, I really began to appreciate how wonderful it was that we could open our home to other people. So I'm so entirely grateful for that upbringing, even though there were definitely times I struggled against it as a young teen. But also, for me, and particularly we were at St Peter's Church, which was a very diverse congregation, and that was probably the greatest gift, to be in a community of very different individuals.
So you got a heightened sense of the value of difference and diversity? Yeah,
definitely, I think. And probably just from coming from St Peter's. And also, again, the teachings of the Bible, and maybe something for me too, maybe being a... I've been called unusual, so I use that not as... I don't feel like that, but that's what people sort of say, is you are a bit strange or something. So that's... I always just have this natural kind of want to defend anyone on the outside of things. I didn't really know where to head, and I was at Wellington Girls College, and we were all encouraged to go into law or medicine, and I didn't really want to take on a huge course of study like that. So I just kind of headed off into my university career and did a very, very broad degree, like the broadest possible. It was a BA, and kind of came out of that, started doing theatre in the middle of it, and then just found myself really working freelance in the arts, and kind of 10 years suddenly passed where I didn't even think about anything, and suddenly I was like, oh gosh, I seem to have actually chosen a career for myself, which is comedian, artist kind of thing, and I feel like I never really consciously decided to do that. It just kind of all escalated around me.
And he genuinely asked me to do this. I'm not making this up. He asked me to read out a message as him. So if you'll just excuse me for a moment.
I love comedy. I think it's such a great gift to be able to make people laugh, and everyone wants to be loosened up and laugh, and then you kind of relax, and then you can actually get into areas that you're not allowed to discuss face on, yes. Which I think is fantastic. So it's kind of this invisible tool that you can use.
Every other person on the beach had this book in front of them, the Da Vinci Code. And I finally felt that I'd succumbed to the pornography of mass culture.
I don't know what that hold is that a book can have on you sometimes, but so many of my friends had recommended that book to me, that it was full of really gripping issues that I, as someone interested in spirituality, would be obviously really into. And I was sort of surprised that my friends could get it so wrong. And
To what extent is Christian faith a resource for the artistic work that you undertake?
One of the things I've really enjoyed about the Christian teachings that I was raised on is this sense of going against the tide and against the majority, and that's certainly very helpful in the arts. I wanted to be a psychiatrist for quite a while, but then my sister was a doctor and she said, can't have two doctors.
So you've got to become a comedian.
Yeah, so I went to comedy and the arts.
Shall I give you you another clue? That's right. I've become a feminist. Farewell, male impression and subjugation. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get you. I was aiming for that man behind you who's not laughing. Bloody male impressor.
Would you say that you are an outsider as a person who has a particular Christian faith?
Yeah, in the culture that we're in now, I feel that it's quite an anti-Christian culture, and that Christianity is one of the few kind of choices that it's acceptable to bag. I have a lovely fiancé, Thomas, who is, when we first started going out, he was at a dinner party and I wasn't there, and his friends all sort of said, well, what's it like going out with a Christian? And I was so angry when I heard that. It's like, well, what else would you say? Would you say, like, what's it like going out with a Samoan or any other sort of thing? Like, because it can become such a defining feature of your personality. It's like, that's one part of who I am. And I'm happy about that part, but sometimes that's all you're identified as.
Yeah.
I know.
You should stop reading that stuff, babe.
Yeah, babe. Tom comes from a sort of Eastern mystical religious perspective, and I have, you know, I love those traditions very much as well. And he has slowly come to understand Christianity the way I see it, obviously, and sees so much. He's kind of happy to know that there's another whole part to it, and so I do sort of feel that there is some ignorance out there as to what to me is true Christianity really means.
I can't remember what the
I can't remember either, but she
keep thinking it was like
pulling at
closer.
her ear at one stage.
So what are the assumptions you think that people have? What's weird about being Christian in their eyes?
Well, I mean, obviously in this world that we're in now, that religion is the cause of these great, atrocious wars that are being waged. And I think for many people that's the biggest thing to get past is how are people... I mean, for me, these wars are so against the entire premise of Christianity, and the fact it's so wrong that we're using that as a justification for killing people. I mean, God definitely doesn't want that.
Cleanse the thoughts of our hearts by the inspiration of thy Holy Spirit, that we may perfectly love thee and worthily magnify thy holy name, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Lord Jesus Christ said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like, namely this, thou shalt love thy neighbour as thyself.
In the context that I'm in this particular world and environment that we're in now, I can see that the name of Christianity is rightly maligned, and so that's kind of a difficult tension to sit with.
So what is your perspective? When you talk about God, what do you mean?
For me, God is, well, sort of a mix between like a spirit, an energy, a vibe.
Vibe.
A vibe, the great vibe.
I'm over 50, help me with vibe.
Or like a way of being, a way of doing things that are all about love and forgiveness and also great bounty as well. The other idea I think of is probably like an eternal spring that just constantly flows, because that's the other sort of sense of it, is that it's ever changing, like a fire, or, you know, God is not always about being calm. Like sometimes there's a righteous anger and the truth needs to be voiced very clearly and angrily. But that God is kind of this like deeper kind of truth. I definitely see it in the centre of something, like the core of the earth, that you can come as close to or as far away from as you want, and you can come from all sort of directions as well, but it's always there and it's boundless.
I can see a number of people who have a kind of focused spirituality saying, yeah, that makes sense. So what makes it Christian?
I mean, for me, I see, and I probably am going out on a little bit of a limb here, but I feel that I've grown up in this Christian faith. That's my particular family that I belong to, and that I could have been born into many different faiths and still felt very happy with them. And I accept my Christian faith, and it doesn't have problems for me apart from the ones that I articulated about the war. But that's kind of one kind, and there is for me like a kind of a universal God that I don't really care what name you give that, because what's important about it is the behaviour that comes from it. So I'm increasingly interested in many other religions, and for me it's like looking at what is the person and how do they behave, and do they act with kindness towards their fellow human.
For someone to get married to someone of another race or another culture or of another creed, or someone who is different in some other kind of way, is something which we all take a little bit of adjusting to, because we're comfortable within the zone in which we grew up.
Do you have a tension between the way you understand and live out the Christian life and the institutional church?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say it's a tension, but yeah, you're right, there's a gap there or something that I'm so happy being a Christian and having my own beliefs, but yes, I feel so uncomfortable and embarrassed about segments of the Christian church, and I have at times, including this present time, wondered if I should not call myself a Christian, and so many of my friends, like challenge me on it a lot of the time, and really sort of think I'm a bit mad for believing in it.
Do you feel as if you have to carry the responsibility for all the other Christians in the world's decisions and actions?
Well, I feel that we're part of a group, and when people criticise Christianity, like I'm always like, yeah, but this isn't what is happening is not actually Christian in my understanding of it.
And the Feast of Pentecost, which we celebrate today, picks up entirely on that, because here was a gospel that had been proclaimed by Jesus, a good Jewish boy growing up in a Jewish context, preaching the gospel to Jewish people. His disciples were all Jewish, and now after his death, his resurrection, his ascension, they are waiting in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, and suddenly the Spirit comes like a rushing mighty wind, as we heard, and all those people from those manifold races are filled with the Spirit, and they hear the gospel being proclaimed to them, each in their own tongue.
Christ was such a radical who totally rocked the boat. And again, I'm like, well, how is Christianity now a conservative force when it always used to be about challenging the status quo? Yeah.
It's basically the conservative nature which is part of any institution, which you find frustrating.
Yes, it is that. And then of course it's the gross acts that these institutions, well, not exactly the institutions perpetrate, but they don't condemn the actions of people, acting in the name of Christianity.
So these issues we're more aware of today in some of the tensions involved where different cultures and creeds meet up and at times clash, often with tragic consequences, as in that situation in Iraq.
How many of the church people are, that outspoken and condemnatory about the US policies?
Right.
And again, this is the thing, is that is what most of the society will sort of see. We'll see Bush's actions and see, him talking about making this in the name of God. I mean, for me, it's that kind of reductionist, like going down to only one way of looking at things and simplifying down to one level, very binary thinking. And that's so dangerous to me because, a rope of many strands is strong, and when it's just one strand, it's...
Yeah, and so when you say binary, you mean it's either it's right or it's wrong,
that's
and it's
right.
simple.
That's right, yeah. And whereas there is safety for me in variety and diversity, whereas, I think that, Christ himself talked a lot about hanging out with the tax collectors and the outcasts and the prostitutes, and, he was not... So again, for me, how are these fundamentalist Christians, how have they removed themselves so far from Christ's actions? I mean, that's the name they take, Christ. So why are they not acting like he did? And like a lot of these fundamentalist churches, I've had friends who've belonged to them, and then when they decide to leave, they're completely excommunicated. And you're not to have any other friends apart from that kind of group. And I feel like, well, a true and living faith makes you strong enough that you can exist in the outside world and actually love the outside world for what it is.
God bless you.
Yeah. Yeah.
My father, you know, he was always very much politically out there in the world trying to improve people's lives and, you know, fight against bank charges on people who had less than $500 in their account, for example. And that's the model that I kind of grew up on, and that whole social justice, that's very important to me because... But he's been criticised so much for, like, you know, the church belongs to the church and you should have nothing to do with politics and stay out. The church can't just kind of exist in a little happy, you know, bricked towers that then have sort of cake stalls and go around and visit their elderly parishioners, you know? Like, it really, for me, it really needs to exist in the outside world.
So, Jo, I mean, you're passionate about the role of the church and the place of Christian faith in the world. Did you ever think of becoming a priest yourself?
Yeah, I definitely did. I've probably crossed that possibility out now, but yep, definitely up to about 5 years ago, I often thought that would be something that I'd like to do. I was a lay chaplain at the Victoria University for a while. If I was a sort of priest artist, then I think I'd be way out there. I love my position as an independent artist, that I couldn't say the things that I'm saying to you now if I was part of the church, because I would have to be careful. And so I really cherish that freedom that I have.
And I thought I'd give him a couple of days to cool down, right, because he always takes a while to cool down. But that same night he came round and he dropped me off this beautiful necklace. Well, I mean, sure, I had to tie the rope on, but he gave me the brick. He just, right, really romantically came round in the middle of the night and dropped it through my window. It was really touching.
Tonight's winner is... Jo Randerson!
Yeah!
Do you think as a comedian you've got a role in the church?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how good the church is at laughing at itself. Most institutions find that difficult. I've often thought about the theatrical link too, that, you know, sitting there watching these, being part of these grand locations where people come out in these costumes and you have this ritualistic behaviour. They do a little sort of speech, a little recitation, you know, you all get up and have wine and bread.
The blood of Christ, the cup of salvation.
This is such a grand theatrical presentation, and I learned a lot from my father actually watching him, you know, like quietly whisper to people, more bread, you know, and I do that sort of thing on stage myself. So there's that sense of the show must go on, and yeah, there's a nice kind of link there for me with that. And I guess the comedy aspect in particular, well, comedy is such a subversive form, and again, it's an important outlet for things that aren't allowed to be spoken in the mainstream, but when you sort of can laugh about them, it's kind of fine, and you can let these truths be said. And I think that is one of the roles of a Christian voice too, is to let the truth be spoken, even if it's against the authority and the powers that be, you know, that it has to come out. And I mean, art has that role generally too. I think it's always about restoring that balance and having the other voice being heard.
So, Jo, what is it that you really like about writing now that that's what you've ended up doing?
Well, I guess I like that you can go anywhere with it, that there are no bounds, and you can sort of enter this other world that I just don't think I could be in any other profession, because, yeah, they're too strict, and you kind of have to follow the rule book all the time. I just can't do it. Too disciplined.
Not so long ago you were involved in Our Angels OK project. Can you tell us what that project was about?
Yeah, that was a fantastic project that the Royal Society kind of instigated. They paired up 10 creative writers with physicists, and I wrote a kind of creative essay. I was so intrigued by lots of these questions. You know, are there other worlds with different sets of rules that coexist at the same time as our own? I mean, these are questions at the heart of deep physics, and they're questions that I was struggling with a lot as an artist, well, thinking about. We went over to London with it to do some presentations there, and that was really interesting for me too, being part of the science communities. Like, we went to a couple of science festivals.
As artists and scientists, we must continue to express, to venture into the unknown abyss, to forage for scraps of knowledge, to build bridges between the distant outposts and the thriving central settlements, and to report our findings, however vague, inconsequential, or downright wrong they may appear. We must place our stones in the pond without knowing if they will fall to the bottom or provide valuable stepping points for others. We must trust that our actions will contribute in some way to the general ongoing movement of the universe, and that God is working his purpose out, that life indeed is going somewhere.
People tend to think that you can't be a scientist and have
Right.
religious faith. Do you think that's true?
I mean, for one, there are many religious scientists. Certainly the kind of norm, if you're a scientist, is to dismiss religion as some crazed madman's ravings. But I just think they're different things. Why can't you believe hard scientific truth and also accept great mystery and the unknowingness of the world? That wonderful mystery to me is so much a part of the world as it exists, and so why try and kind of pin everything down and understand it all? I think we should try as well, but I'm saying there's room for, you know, many colours on our palette. And let that start to dominate your body. So it's kind of like a mantra that's running through you. And speed your walk up. And you have urgently got to get something to someone. I think there is some kind of communication that happens across the world, and I don't understand how it happens. I believe in that something is happening through the dream state. There's something in the collective unconscious that I believe in, things like prayer and in healing. I don't understand how they work, but I really believe they do, and I think it's partly what happens to you as someone who engages in that when you sit there and put some time and energy into thinking about someone that you care about and praying for that person or that situation, that you open yourself up to the possibility of things that you could do towards that situation that might make you more loving towards that person or more inclined to do a generous act.
You, O God, are infinitely generous.
So this prayer, as you're explaining it, is that a kind of, would you use the phrase, a spiritual exercise or something like that?
We all have a spiritual component to our person, and I think that your spiritual component as well needs nurturing.
No, but I thought we could maybe do some pretend painting.
And there are lots of things you can do. I mean, for me, I love walking, looking at gardens, being outside in nature, being with animals and children and old people. Like, these sort of things are very spiritually nurturing for me, and prayer and meditation are a part of that too. That just to kind of sit, especially in these like busy lives where everyone runs around with cups of coffee and things all the time, cell phones on the other hand, that, you know, like, you don't get much time out, and I think that's very important in the moment.
I've done some posters before as well.
Yeah.
Tom and myself have been going out for a couple of years, spent last year travelling away overseas, which was fantastic. And when we were away, you know, the whole make or break thing, well, travelling for us really made our relationship. Not that it wasn't good beforehand, but it was fantastic, no fights, everything, and it just became sort of obvious to us that we wanted to get married, really. So we came back, thought we'd throw this big party. The engagement sort of thing was like a good excuse to kind of have that and get people together and see people we hadn't seen for the whole year. And it was wonderful. We had a great kind of picture on the invite, which was because Tom and I do lots of street performance and theatre together, and we were in the Cuba Street Carnival as these amazing, I thought, skeleton bodysuits with sort of wild hair and Mexican hats. And so there was just this beautiful picture someone took of, he was putting my face paint on, we just kind of sitting there in our suits, you know, sort of half dressed, and I was sort of smiling and he was kind of putting this on. And so that was a great, we thought obviously that totally captures what we want to represent for our engagement photo. And then it was funny, lots of people thought we'd staged the whole shoot, that we'd kind of conceived the thing and got these costumes and everything like this, but it was just a candid moment.
That's a special moment that said it all.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you think happens when people die?
I had huge fights at school about heaven and hell, which I don't really believe in as fundamental concepts. I definitely believe that something continues on, that the spirit continues on in some kind of way. I'm quite interested in theories of reincarnation and sort of coming back in different forms. I think there is some great kind of there's some sort of link. I mean, lives are lived, and it's not that they just disappear.
Death came. She was fast. She took him. She wasn't scary or sad, kind of friendly, greeted him warmly, took his hand, led him off to another place, a warm one. It wasn't like a tunnel, it was like a slide. Off he went, I waved, he didn't see me. And as he left, I thought fondly of his soul. Where to, my young friend? To which unknown glen are you now travelling? Amongst which shady characters and goblins will you pass your days? Will you find friendship there, comfort? Will any form of happiness be present, any pain? Should we expect you back sometime, in any form? By which off-white signal should we know you upon your return? A small sound? A hum?
We can't ever really know what happens, but I definitely feel very strongly that the spirit continues in some way, or comes back.
Is there a tension with other Christians about this, do you think?
Probably.
Yeah.
I tend to sort of avoid heading into... Well, actually, to be quite honest, I don't associate with a lot of Christians. Like, most of the people I associate with are non-Christians. And it's quite wonderful for me when I do get a chance to discuss my faith with another person who believes in that. But... yeah, I think definitely I'd be very unpopular in lots of groups for that opinion. I mean, I also really believe in that sort of that heaven and hell are present on this earth too, that you kind of create your own. I don't think you live this life for what's going to happen after. Right. Like, this life is here for its own reason, and we need to act, with integrity and courage and love now, because thereby we kind of create our own heaven or hell.
Maybe we should send them one too. I'll do that.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.